Welcome to the CDP, the Commercial Directors Podcast, where we discuss all things commercial directing, treatments, pitching, problem solving on set, and commercial breakdowns. Now you host Evan Swinehart.
3, 2, 1, talk to me.
All right, everybody, welcome to the Commercial Directors Podcast. I'm your host, Evan Swinehart, and today we have a very special guest, Jon Bregel. So Jon is a filmmaker, director, and also coaches filmmakers, and he has a very interesting journey of his career that I can't wait for him to share with everybody. So Jon, welcome to the show, and how are you doing today?
What's up, Evan? I'm doing good. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Well, Jon reached out to me on Instagram and had an interest in being on this show, and once I learned more about Jon and his journey, and we talked, I was just getting so excited to kind of have him share his story, because I think it's very valuable, because Jon has been to the top, owned a production company, was working for amazing brands, winning all sorts of awards, has won had 13 Vimeo Staff Picks to his name, and then kind of decided to pivot. So Jon, just kind of tell your story, because it's a fascinating story.
Yeah, for sure. Well, let me think. Where do I begin? I guess typical story. We talked about this a little last time. Just got into filmmaking through skateboarding. And what happened actually was I was a skateboarder, like an avid skateboarder, all through like elementary school, middle school, high school. And then in high school, I broke my arm 3 times in a row, like back to back to back. So, all my friends were skateboarders. And so I wanted to kind of find a way to still be around that. And so filmmaking and filming kind of became my default role. And I happened to love doing it. And so that was sort of how I found my way into filmmaking, was through skate videos. And then when it came time to think about and like consider college and if that was going to be something that I was going to do, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. And I didn't know that filmmaking was a path that could actually be fruitful, like financially. And I got it was like a, what do you call it? Like a brochure to a film school in Orlando called Full Sail. And they just had a lot of photos of like people on set and backlots and cameras and this and that. And I just remember thinking like, that looks really cool. And that kind of sparked my interest in the idea of film school. So I started researching and looking around at a lot of different film schools, and ultimately came back to that first one, which was Full Sail. And actually it was one of the only ones that I didn't get into a lot of the ones I applied to, but Full Sail didn't have any admissions policy. So that worked out quite well. So I just got in, and fortunately for me, I just fell in love with more traditional like filmmaking. And because prior to that, it was all skateboard videos. And so when I went there, it was kind of like, I don't know if it was lucky, because lucky that I loved it, because it was kind of like a long shot. Like it was a big risk to go there and just assume that was going to work out. And thankfully it did. And I had a really amazing class that I was a part of. There was about like 100 of us. And then I want to say 5 people in the class became like best friends and made personal projects like all through film school, and then graduated from film school with enough of a portfolio to get some like freelance jobs here and there. And then I worked in news for like a part of a year when I graduated as like a shooter and an editor. And then just slowly started pivoting into like freelance work and toured with bands a lot after that, and was just doing like everything under the sun. And then really what happened was I started to get really exhausted by like the traditional freelance lifestyle, and just working for a lot of like kind of shady, it felt like shady. I remember being kind of like upset that I was like, is this really the industry that I just paid all this money to go to film school? And like, is this really what it is? Because this is like kind of disappointing for me. It's kind of what it felt like. Because, when you're doing that from like, years on end, and working these really crappy shoots with long hours and bad food, and it's kind of like, is this it? And fortunately, a lot of the friends that I went to film school with in Orlando, we all moved to New York City, or we were all there at the same time. And so myself and one of my friends, Khalid Mutasib, who's a cinematographer who also went to Full Sail with me, we kind of were a bit like rebellious, I guess. And we're like, screw this. Like, let's stop working for other people. And like, let's just try and do our own thing. And so we continue to work for other people in a freelance sense, but over time we were building towards having a business and a company where we had more ownership over like who could come on the shoots. And that was a big part of it to us, was to just have like a foundation of people that we really enjoyed being around, and that could be a consistent thing for us. And so that was the birth of a production company that I was a partner in for almost 8 years, called Variable. And that's kind of a whole nother chapter, but that was sort of my whole foray into like the traditional sort of like branded commercial music video, all that type of stuff space.
So I want to hit on a few things there. I don't want to go too deep into this, but it's just kind of funny because I feel like most people, when I talk to about how they got into filmmaking in this career, it's through skateboarding, which is just kind of hilarious. So, and I'm just kind of curious because I never thought about it until you were just talking about it. I was like, why do you think skateboarding leads to so many people becoming, commercial directors or in the filmmaking industry?
I don't know, but I guess if I had to guess, you have to be on your feet a lot and constantly coming up with ideas on the go. And it's like a really creative medium in that regard. And I also think skateboarders are just like a highly creative group of people in general. And I think about all the friends that I grew up skating with. They're like some of the most creative people I've ever been around. And so maybe that has something to do with it.
Yeah, for sure. Well, talk a little bit about how like Variable started, right? And talk about the clients you guys had and the scale that you grew to, because I think that's going to set up kind of your pivot really well.
For sure. So when the company started out, it was called Variable, and it was myself, and I had two partners at the time. One was a DP, the other one was a producer, and there was me as like a director, DP, kind of creative director type. It started out by just a lot of passion projects initially. One of the ideas we had was like, okay, we need to build our reel to a place where we're proud of it and to where we are comfortable going after the work that we want to do, and have work on our reel that we want people to hire us to do. And so that was the goal from day one. So I think we had, if I recall, it was like maybe $60,000 or something like that between us all saved up. And we put all that money into, I want to say it was like 4 or 5 different passion projects. And it was somewhat strategic in the sense of knowing like, we're going to have one kind of storytelling piece, one slow motion piece, one kind of branded spec, etc. And we just went all in, and that took place over the course of a year, which also was sort of the genesis of like the Vimeo Staff Pick generation. And so we were also living in New York City, and the Vimeo headquarters was right there, near there. And we kind of rubbed shoulders with some of the people in the Staff Pick space, just because the filmmaking scene's pretty small in New York City. And so we just happened to be at the right place at the right time. And a lot of those projects, I think all of them got Vimeo Staff Picks. And that was at a time when that was like a really trafficked place by agencies and brands. And so I remember, for one, like the first call that I got was to my cell phone, which was from one of Nike's agencies in London. And they just called me and asked me if I wanted to direct an ad with Spike Lee in it for Nike. And I was like, this is crazy, because I'd never directed an ad before. Like, I was a DP prior to that, And then it must have been no more than a month later, National Geographic got in touch with us to start working with them on promos, because they saw some of the slow motion stuff we were doing. And we're like, we want to do something like that. And so that evolved into I want to say like a 7-year relationship with them. And it was all on the basis of those initial passion projects that we had. That was really what kicked us into gear. But also we had the three of us, as a director, DP, producer combination. And we were trying to work entirely for ourselves. And so it was, we'd have to do jobs here and there to pay the bills as freelancers, but we would always bring that money back into the company. And it was very much that type of like community mindset from the beginning.
What do you think made, because you guys grew really big, working on, tons of big jobs, big agencies, kind of something that I think a lot of people dream about. And you also had a lot, I think it's cool looking at your work because you already mentioned like Khalid, who is insanely talented DP, and you had Solomon on your roster. I know you had something with one of the Duplass brothers too, right?
I just DP'd a feature for Jay
Okay.
Duplass. That was more recently, but yeah.
Okay, cool. So, but like you had like Solomon and a couple other directors who are really big. Like it seems like you got them at the beginning of their career. So it's kind of a two-part question. Like, like how did you get all this great talent in one spot? And then two, what do you think made Variable successful at the time? What kind of separated you guys from the pack?
I think it all comes down to the team, really, at the end of the day. Like, we wanted to build something together that was sort of like a culture that was bigger than any one of us individually. And it was a very abnormal way to build a career and to build a company because, like, us as founders, we weren't just making like bucket loads of cash or anything like that because we were pouring everything back into the company, back into the team members, into the projects. And we were making, I think it was like $5,000 a month for the first like 3 to 4 years of that business. And if I was freelance, I would have been loaded, same with Khalid and Tyler. And so it's that mentality, I think, of like building something that's bigger than yourself and having faith in the mission of the whole thing. And instead of just cashing paychecks and, getting rich. And I learned a lot of lessons that we could get into later about maybe why that wasn't the best idea for me to do. But it resulted in some incredible work and incredible hires and a really amazing culture that unfortunately didn't last longer than like 8 years. But I think that was like the secret sauce, really.
Great. Well, let's talk about that shift because, like I said, I think from the outside, everybody would be like, "You're crazy to leave that and what you had." And it's interesting to hear too, though, like where maybe people see the projects you're working on and they think that, oh man, John's just like rolling in cash, but you weren't. You were pouring it back into your own company, which I think is pretty common for production company owners. I think from the outside, it looks like one thing where the reality is completely different. I know that from my own experience as well. So talk about your shift and kind of this big decision that you made to ultimately leave Variable.
Yeah, so that was probably like 7.5+ years into the business. And so at that point, I want to say it was like 4 years into the business, I kind of experienced like a whole life cycle of like commercial branded filmmaking. And I got the type of experiences that I was kind of looking for, worked with the types of like brands and agencies. And so it just stopped being fun at that point. It stopped being like a chase and started to realize like, oh, that's what this is. Like, this is what we're doing. This is what we built, because we never really designed the company to be like a commercial company from the get-go. Like, that was never really the plan. It sort of happened. That was a goal to like, for that to be one piece of the business, but not to be like the whole thing. But as you know, like the money from commercial and branded, it enabled us to like bring on the people that we wanted to work with. And but so anyway, it just sort of felt like a machine after like year 4. And then that's when I kind of started to burn out. I want to say probably after like year 3 or 4, I was burning out, and we were trying to build our model more, because we didn't have experience with a production model either. We didn't know how to build a production company. We knew that there was companies that had directors and had rosters, but we were trying to stay kind of like unconventional in a lot of ways. Like we were trying to get people to like hire us as like a team, as like a unit. But the more we grew and the bigger the jobs get, we realized that like we just couldn't break the traditional model of the industry in the way that we kind of thought we could. And we really tried hard to do that. And it took a lot of energy and a lot of rejection to where we ultimately just kind of surrendered to a traditional model, which is, you know, representing directors, and that's fine. But what I didn't realize at the time, as like at this point, it was just myself and my partner, my other partner, producer, Tyler, because Khalid had left to pursue his own freelance thing after like a couple of years. And so all the creative side of the company was on me for like a long time. And then we had to start bringing on directors, and we had to bring on directors that were kind of reasonable and up and coming, because we couldn't be paying, you know, $15,000, $20,000 day rates like at that point in the company. There might have been a few jobs that afforded that type of thing, but like generally, since our company was structured as like a team business, like giving all that budget to one director just seemed absolutely absurd from where we were coming from, because we knew that like with that director rate, we could fund our whole company for like 1 year on one great job, you know, which we needed a lot of the time. And so we needed to find directors that were like of a team mentality, but they were still freelance and still incredibly talented and had a lot of promise in their work. And that's incredibly hard to find, because with the young, talented directors with a lot of promise, a lot of times they're getting offers from other more traditional companies that may be making them different propositions and so on and so forth. So it was really hard to find those people, but luckily we did. We found a handful of them. I want to say there was, maybe by the end, I think there was 7 of us. And I think everybody saw what we were doing from like a cultural perspective, and just spending time with us and understanding our values and how we wanted to be different from like the traditional model. And we poured a lot of love into all the directors we had. I mean, a lot of love, a lot of money, a lot of support to like really build their reels and get them off on the right foot in the business. And I completely forget what question I'm answering at this point. I apologize.
No, it's all good. It was kind of like talking about that transition from, you know, kind of pivoting from owning the production company and directing into, you know, a different career. But
Oh, wow.
but before you do that, that's all right. Because before you do that, it sparked something that I want to talk about, which is, and I think maybe we talked about this in our kind of pre-interview, but is like looking back and kind of with your experience and knowing everything you know now, like, and that's something I've been thinking about a lot too, is do you think if a director is like, okay, there's a director up and coming or whatnot, do you think it's a good idea for a director to own a production company? Or do you think they should just focus on the directing craft and freelance?
Mm-hmm. I think it depends what they want entirely. Like some directors like me, like I need community and I need to be surrounded by people that have shared values. And for me, building a company as a director was a way to do that. It's got its own challenges. I wouldn't say it's harder. It's just a lot of different challenges. For one being that you can't be the center of your own universe every day, because you have a lot of other responsibilities that can then sometimes make it difficult to grow your reel and like really see your voice to fruition. But if you really crave like community and that fuels your creative spirit, like I think that's one road to do it, but also knowing like to have the support of like a producer and, you know, at least a producer. I think if you're a director, someone that can really take a lot of slack. Like my producer was just unbelievable. Tyler Ginter was his name. And he did so much that enabled me to direct even the amount that I was, but even me as a director, I knew I wasn't seeing my potential like at all when I was at that company, but I could see it enough because he was taking up so much slack. But even still, like I was getting offers from different reps and things like the whole time there. And I could see what, if I went that path, maybe that would have been better for me as a director, but I wanted community, and that's still the same for me as a filmmaker today.
Well, yeah, let's talk about that. So what kind of made you step away from Variable?
Yeah. I mean, it was just years and years of chronic burnout and exhaustion and depression that I wasn't addressing at the time. I was 22 when that company started, and so I didn't really know myself and my limitations and my gifts and everything. It was all a journey of self-discovery in a really intense way. But I would constantly just sacrifice myself for like the work and for the company, to the point where there wasn't really anything of myself left. Probably after like, honestly, it was probably after like year 4, I was just kind of like going through the motions and just staying alive and like with the work. And yeah, it was definitely an addiction, like a workaholism, like getting all of the validation from the work. And I lived in New York City, and my roommates were filmmakers, all my friends were filmmakers, my company was filmmakers, and like my whole life was filmmaking. So it was really hard to see outside of that for me. And so it just reached a point where, I mean, there was a lot of points, but it ultimately reached a point where, well, basically what happened was I was filming a car commercial in China, and I met a woman who's now my wife, and meeting her opened my eyes up to the fact that like, oh wow, there's a lot more to life than filmmaking. And actually, if I want to have a great relationship, I actually need to take a break from filmmaking for a while to figure out how to do this. Because I'd had a lot of like failed relationships in my 20s. Fortunately, nothing like super serious, but enough to be like, okay, I'm the problem, you know?
Yeah, for sure.
And so I met her, and I was like, wow, she's so special. And if I keep going at the pace that I'm going, this isn't going to work out. And we'd also just recently moved into a brand new office space in Dumbo, which we kind of put all of our chips into it because we were kind of like, I was trying to convince myself and the team, we were all trying to convince ourselves, because we were all kind of a little burned out, but we were trying to convince ourselves that like, oh, if we got this incredible new office space and like decked it out with all this awesome stuff, like maybe that would reinvigorate us or something, you know? It sounds kind of silly thinking about it now, but there was like a real excitement factor about that. We'd like repped a couple new directors, and we're like, all right, we're going to just go all in. And honestly, I think looking back, if we were all wise, we wouldn't have done that. We would have just like stayed in our small space in Manhattan and just like let things take their course. But that office, getting that office and then meeting my wife in China and coming back to that office and being like, this is just way too big. Like, I can't keep up with this, was sort of the final straw for it all.
Like then, like where did you go? Like, what did you do once you kind of had this realization?
I had a really difficult month of my life making that decision. I just remember I was living in my van in New York City at the time for like a few months, and it was just in that period. And I remember it being like 110 degrees in my van, sweating and stressing out profusely about what I was going to do next with my life after leaving. But I knew I had to leave the company. I knew in my soul that I had to leave. And so what happened was I ended up moving to China for a couple months and just spending time there, just like not working and just not thinking about work as much as I possibly could, which has its own set of challenges for me at the time. And I was really just like questioning a lot of things, like who am I? You know, what is my identity outside of this work, and trying to, you know, build roots to a relationship in that space is really challenging too. And really start to realize like I was constantly the problem in the relationship. And so the lens was like pointed back on me for the better part of like, I want to say like 7 years of my life probably, because that's about how long it's been. But just constantly being aware that like, whoa, I dug myself this really deep hole in this like identity as a filmmaker, and I need to figure out like, what is this about? Like, where did this come from? Why did this happen? And how can I heal? And so the journey after leaving has pretty much been that in a lot of ways, and also like rediscovering myself as a filmmaker outside of the traditional kind of like business. And that's looked a lot of different ways. That's a whole conversation in and of itself, I guess.
Well, one of those things is you're now coaching filmmakers and directors. So let's go there because I'm like super interested in this. And honestly, I was on your side. I was like, I should fill out the 60-minute, what was it, brief or whatever, because it's something that I've always looked for in this career is mentorship.
Yeah.
I never had a mentor. Really wish I would have. I just think it would have helped along the way. I also think it's part of the reason I started this podcast. I think directing can kind of be a lonely career. Every other department has, either multiple people on set or seems to have a little bit more of a community. Directing, there's only one director on set, and it's very rare that unless you're in a company and you go to an office with other directors, it's very rare you actually get to work with other directors. So you're now coaching filmmakers and directors, and I just kind of want to talk about how you like kind of decided to do that, and like why you did that, and then also like what is coaching look like in this space?
Okay, so coaching, I was introduced to coaching in my own journey about, I want to say it was like 10 years ago. So this was at one point at one of my kind of pivotal burnout periods in the film industry. And my business partner said, John, if you don't get a therapist or coach, I can no longer be your business partner. and I was like, wow, okay. Like, I don't even know what therapy is or a coach. So like, clearly I'm lost. But so I ended up deciding to hire a coach. And at the time it was Life Coach. And that totally changed my worldview. Well, began to change my worldview, and was the first time that I really became aware that what I was actually looking for in my life was love. And that's full circle to like meeting my wife years later. So it's interesting how that works. But through working with her and learning a lot of tools and seeing the transformation that I had in my own life, and like self-advocacy and boundary setting and all these types of things, it just planted a seed in me. And since then I've gone on to work with career coaches. I've worked with an ADHD coach, which is such a thing. And, my personality just works really well having somebody to coach me through the different seasons of life, the different rhythms of life. And that accountability is, I respond, and a lot of people respond really well to it. Thankfully I did. And so towards the end of my time at Variable, one of the things that was like really getting me through those days was just like mentoring other filmmakers. And I would constantly have people reaching out to me and asking questions. And there was one person in particular that I just like really enjoyed working with. And a kind of a light bulb moment went off in my head that was like, you know what? Like, I think I could do this coaching thing, because I'm basically doing that with this filmmaker, and all I need to do is like add a little bit of structure to it. And so I told that filmmaker, I was like, hey, look, I want to take you on as a coaching client, pro bono, but all I need you to do is just give me really great feedback and help me design this in a way that you think would benefit other filmmakers. And that was sort of like the genesis of it, was back then in my like last year at Variable. And I didn't start making money off of it actually until, I want to say it was a few months after I left the company, because I was like, I got to figure out a way how to make money. And because I didn't want to get back into doing like directing commercials and the traditional like industry stuff at the time. I had so much healing to do. And so as I was going on my healing journey, I was working with, at first it was, it might have been 3 or 4 filmmakers at a time. And then over time, I tend not to work with more than like 6 or 7 people at a time, even to this day. But I've just developed a system and an approach and kind of a philosophy for how it works, and I've gotten certified and all that type of stuff to really feel confident in what I'm doing, and I love doing it. And so I guess that's the transition into coaching. And then the what is coaching? I think kind of like the best way that I would describe it is it's a collaborative and actionable process of deep inquiry that fosters reflection and personal growth. And the goal is to guide clients towards their deepest dreams and desires. And the way we do that, and the way I do that, I should say, is I help each client get clarity on their values and like what's most deeply meaningful to them, get some clarity on their goals, and then we create a roadmap together and walk through it using their values as the compass. And that is the whole thing to me, is like the values, because it's really hard to like fail yourself when you're looking at your values like each day in reflection and conversation of your actions. And so without the values, coaching to me would be no more than me just like pushing my advice or walking people into a cave without a flashlight, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. Let's talk about values, because we had Lori Shaman on a couple episodes ago.
I know Lori.
And yeah, she's amazing. And
Yeah, she's great.
as a new mother, she's been thinking about values a lot, so it's kind of been in my head, and I'm just kind of curious how you work through with clients, kind of discovering those values.
For sure. So I've developed just a basic tool. It's just a PDF, like a fillable PDF. And, you can find these things all over the internet too, and probably ChatGPT nowadays. You could probably type in like, how do I find my values, which is wild. But in a practical note, there's a lot of ways to think about it. But I think for the sake of the podcast, the way that I would kind of break it down is like, you start with the peak moments in your life where you felt like most alive, proud, or fulfilled. And those could be either like personal or professional, and getting really clear on what was it about that peak experience, like what happened, who was involved, why did that moment feel so meaningful, and start there. And then the second part is just like looking at the patterns that exist across those moments. Like, what are the common themes that show up? Are you drawn to like creativity, honesty, connection, presence, faith? What are they? And start to write down the words that are connected through those peak experiences. And then just stress testing them. I think a lot of times we make values that are more aspirational as opposed to lived. And I think it's really important to get deep and make sure these are things that are actually reflections of your lived experience, as opposed to like things you want to aspire to be, because you don't really want to like strive to live to a value. You want to really live into the value that already exists within you, if that makes sense.
One thing too is like, and then like, so how do you take those values and maybe then apply it to your career? Like, is it something you're like, putting every job towards those values to make sure they're aligned, or how does that kind of then work?
I can just give you like an example from my own life. And, one of my values is presence. And it's really important to me to feel like I can show up to every opportunity and relationship being as fully present as I possibly can. So I do my very best not to take on anything that is going to deter me from a deep state of presence. And so if I have coaching work going on a day to day or for a few weeks ahead, and a commercial opportunity pops up that wants me to travel next week, it's like, I can't do it. I immediately know that I can't do it because I won't be able to be present to the things that I already have going on with my clients. And I wouldn't be able to be present and feel good about it on the commercial job. I'd just be taking on too much stuff. So a lot of times they're just like a really good barometer for like what you're actually capable of showing up for authentically, like fully yourself. And, I mean, that's one example.
No, that's great. I love that. And then like what, like with all your coaching now you're doing, like what are kind of some common threads you are seeing? Like what are kind of most directors, you know, needing, or like maybe like what are you seeing like a lot of them are kind of like missing that you're like, oh, I can kind of fill in this hole and guide them that way?
Yeah. As far as directors, and just to be clear, like directors are probably, I want to say probably like 50% of the people that I work with. But to answer the question specific to directors, it's like, I think there's two different types of directors. There's like directors who are trying to get hired, and then there's directors who are just doing it for the art. And I think for directors who are looking to get hired, which are most of the people that I'm working with because they're investing a good amount of money, it's what I think a lot of them come into it. What's a better way to put this? Let me think about the best way to say this. Because whenever I speak about my coaching clients, I never want to make sure I'm saying anything that makes them sound like they're like missing something. But
yeah, for sure.
I think generally it's a deeper awareness of the inherent politics of our work. We work for brands. We work for clients. This isn't a passion project. And I think that distinction is extremely important if you want to have a sustainable career in this industry, and drawing a line between, you know, what is mine and what is yours. And I think that's the biggest thing. So I'm always encouraging passion projects and encouraging hobbies and things that you can get a catharsis and a release from outside of the commercial work. And I never belittle the commercial work, but it's a job, it's for hire. You do your absolute best, but like there's ways to not get your whole identity completely wrapped up in it, because that's what I experienced. And I just have a lot of empathy for people that are there, because it's a really tricky space to be in.
Yeah, that was so well said. And I know that just from personal experience. I think when like a big shift in my career happened is honestly when I started to like stop caring in a way so much about the work, but so much of it was about not treating it like my passion project and my short film. Like when I had the realization that like, this is their commercial.
Yeah.
This isn't my short film. And if I want to go do whatever I was fighting and butting heads with the creative team about, like I should go do that on my own team and put that into a passion project versus like trying to find an outlet into these, commercial roles. Especially because like a lot of the times these agency and brands, they've been working on this campaign for 6 months, a year, you're brought in at the very end. Like this is their baby way more than it is yours. And so when I kind of start letting go of that and just like obviously coming with punch ups, but way more of a collaborative approach, like I felt like everything just started to like skyrocket and I wasn't as stressed out or depressed. But, that being said, I still think it's very easy to tie, sorry, my dog is whining at me.
No worries.
Sorry, is easy to tie one's self-worth to the work.
Yeah.
And I think that can be dangerous. I know as I've left my old production company and now I'm freelance, there was a time where it got really low and I got like the most depressed I think I've ever been in my life of creating associating not getting work with like self-worth, so as I wasn't getting jobs and as quickly as I thought, like I started to not feel very valuable, if that makes sense. And I'm just curious if you've had that before and like because I do think it's a very common thing to put your creativity and self-worth in the same thing. And so I'm just kind of curious, like how you would approach that.
Well, for me, it's a very spiritual thing, identity, and where I'm receiving my sense of belonging. I think formerly it was through the work. Like I mentioned before, it was all through the community of filmmakers in the business and being perceived as like successful. And that was definitely where I was deriving my sense of identity. And that is also why those formative years in my marriage were like so difficult, because if I wasn't constantly like striving to like achieve something, then I felt like I was a nobody. And that has a really good way of doing damage on a relationship. It's almost as if my wife was getting in the way of like what I thought I needed to feel whole. And so I would say it was largely through marriage and wanting to be able to like nurture and love somebody other than myself that I feel like I've been in this like furnace of transformation in a way over the last like 7 years, where I've just been able to see myself in the mirror, like all the imperfections and warts, and just feel the pain and agony of that I've had to do a lot of like really serious soul searching. And so identity for me, I mean, I'm a Christian now. I wouldn't even say I was a Christian like 7 years ago, but that's what's been really helpful for me, is to feel a part of something greater than myself and a community of people that I connect with and talk about like deep spiritual things. And that's been extremely helpful. A lot of people I've talked to as well, it comes down to spirituality, not necessarily the Christian faith or anything remotely Christian in a lot of cases, but at least this perception that there's like something way bigger out there other than me that brings a sense of meaning and belonging, if that makes sense.
Yeah, for sure. I think it's kind of funny because when you say community, that like really resonates, because when I was kind of in this dark place, you know, and tying my self-worth to the work, my wife threw me a surprise birthday party. And I was on a mountain bike with ride with a bunch of friends, and came down the trail, and there were probably 100 people that my wife had put together on the trail with signs and cowbells and stuff.
That's amazing.
Yeah. And like, you know, it's just this outpouring of love. And I like remember that week I went to my therapist, and she was like, even like, maybe we should put you on meds. And I was like, oh my God, like that's never been an option for me. And I couldn't believe like that it was kind of like getting to that point. Yeah. And then just that party, then we like, you know, everybody kind of like met me at the trail and went back to my house, and we just kind of all had this awesome, party. Like that kind of set me back, like reset me, and was like, okay, this is what matters the most, you know? And like that shit doesn't matter. It's going to figure itself out. And like, yeah, it did. Like it was insane. And like, I can pinpoint that exact moment from like when stuff started like really changing, you know?
Sounds like community is one of your values.
Yeah, I think so. That's
awesome.
Yeah, it was really, really, really cool.
We share that for sure. Community is like everything to me as well. Yeah,
that's awesome. Well, that's why I wanted to have you on, because I felt like there were all these weird similarities and stuff. So I was like, oh, this is so good. And it's not like kind of the traditional format of the pod. So it's super great. I'm curious because like you kind of mentioned this, but I want to ask the question better, is like, what do you see? Like, what is like the main thing you kind of see like for people like coming to you? Like, what is it like that people are like, hey, this is why I need coaching? And like, yeah, maybe talk about that. Like, what's kind of the number one thing you're seeing of like why people come to you?
Number one reason people come to me, I mean, there's always some type of pivot or transition that's underway, whether if it's trying to like level up within a specific realm of like cinematography or directing, or wanting to start a production company or wanting to sustain a production company.
Let's talk about leveling up, because I think that is a big one. Like, what advice do you give somebody who's trying to just level up in whatever kind of field it may be within the industry?
I always start with values again. Like that's always the first thing we do in the process of working together is like really getting clear on who they are, because I think leveling up has a lot to do with alignment, with and attracting and manifesting like who you are.
And so would you then call that kind of like finding their voice?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a massive part of it because that has everything to do with how you talk about yourself, how you position yourself, the type of work you want to make, the themes that emerge through the work. And without that level of foundation, it's very difficult to grow intentionally.
And so when finding your voice, like obviously like you have kind of the values exercise, but what are maybe some other things to help somebody find define their voice? And then what would you suggest if like, okay, maybe someone's getting work, but it's not necessarily like fulfilling that, their voice or, aligning with what their voice is?
Well, I think in the context of filmmaking, like for one, it sounds so obvious, but just like practicing, like just like learning anything, like learning English, like you just do it for years and years and you fail constantly and you learn through the process of doing it, just like any sport, which again is why I think like coaching is impactful because they're aiding you in that journey of finding your voice, or getting better at whatever it may be. And I think a lot of it has to do with like getting really clear on your fears as well. There's an exercise that I'm a big advocate of called fear setting that this guy called Tim Ferriss created, and it's something that I'm constantly doing myself, and in the Nourish community we do it monthly as well. And it's a framework to just really define your fears and learn how to prevent them and learn what you can do to repair them if they do shape up. And oftentimes, we realize the monsters in our mind are just way bigger there than they are in reality, which is like really helpful to get clarity on like who you are and the things you want to go after in terms of like finding your voice and following your voice, I should say. And I think it's also a lot to do with like spiritual practices like meditation, walks, hiking, journaling, all these things to sort of decrease the noise of the world and really come in tune with what our inner voice is saying and seeing the inherent value in that. And I think that takes a lot of courage to do, to just sit in stillness and see what emerges. And I mean, there's a lot of like really practical things, but like we obviously live in a really fearful world. And if we don't protect ourselves from that, it can become really hard to create from a space of authenticity as opposed to a space of trends. So the inward journey, I think, and taking it very, very seriously is how I would encourage and how I do encourage people to get clear on their voice. It's not like a flip of a switch. It's like, it's pretty hardcore stuff, but it's important, especially now in an industry where there's so many directors. It's like, how are you going to separate yourself? Well, like know yourself and bring that forward. And that takes like real time. So in a different type of time than just like making things. So
yeah. For sure. It's funny when you're talking about monsters because, I think myself and a lot of directors have kind of had like imposter syndrome, and I remember when I was doing a lot of therapy, let's talk about imposter syndrome and, it's kind of like that negative voice in your head. And my therapist was like, well, that's not you talking. Like, who is that? And we gave it a name, and so like I named the voice in my head that was kind of like, just this depressing bastard, Stanley. And whenever Stanley shows up, like he's just like this grimy little creep, and
I like that.
It's kind of funny. So just like giving it a name and kind of like being like, God, there's Stanley again. You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. It helped me dissociate with it. Like, that's not me. That's this other person. But
I'm going to steal that. I really like that. That's cool.
Yeah, was super, super valuable. So, I I wanted to talk about, because we talked about it. You mentioned it. I know we talked about it before. Was kind of like the importance of passion projects.
Yeah.
I know you're really big in this, and so maybe just talk about that. Like, why are passion projects important, and why would you push people to make passion projects, and how is that part of the process of, like, finding one's voice or aligning to someone's values?
In recent years, I've actually changed my understanding of passion projects and have started calling them personal projects. And it was like a really big distinction for me from like making something off of passion versus making something that's like inherently personal. So, which could be argued as like the same thing depending on how you look at it. But I like to think of them as personal projects because I think they're the best way to grow as a filmmaker and a human being. It's like journaling on steroids is sort of how I think about it, because there's something very tactical and there's like questions that we're wrestling with. And it's almost as if you kind of imagine like opening your journal up to the world, and it's incredibly vulnerable and brave. And I think that is invaluable if you're looking to get hired for who you are and for the type of work that you want to be doing, because that's who you are. And what other way is there for people to know who you are than to make passion projects or personal projects? So I think they're essential. Every director that I've worked alongside or come up with is constantly working on passion projects. I can remember countless experiences being in 15-passenger vans on commercial shoots, and the directors are working on their passion projects, like editing them, working on the briefs, like in an almost like obsessive way, but it's almost survival, like for a career and artistically. So I think it's twofold. It's, for your career, but also to grow personally is a really powerful tool.
That's awesome. And do you have any maybe just tips and tricks to like around like the personal project? Because I know, like, for me personally, like sometimes it seems very daunting to start a personal project with like you're saying, that like the time, or budget or whatever it is. Like, I think there's so many excuses to make to not do them. So I'm just curious, with all your experience and, working with people who are doing these personal projects, like, I don't know if you have any quick tips that might help people.
Yeah. I mean, for one, like I'll always come back to values as a very practical way to think about it. So like one of your values sounds like it's community, right? So I would say, what's in your community? Create a boundary that's in your community and find something that is meaningful to you and start there and create the boundary. It might be, and you can even get more specific to the community. It might not be like the town. Maybe it's a specific community that you're a part of. But what is a way to kind of make sure that your values are reflected in the personal project? And a lot of times, regardless of if the value is community, I think making things that are close to home is a really great place to get started, because it's really hard to make excuses if you don't have to travel or spend too much money to make the project. I've made some of my best personal projects for like $500 because they were with a neighbor down the street or like a family friend. And I think also, like, if there's specific questions that you're struggling with, like in your personal life or wanting answers to, there's always interesting people in our communities that are like know more than we do or see things differently than we do. And, it doesn't have to be like a magnum opus. I think the reason I think of passion projects as personal projects is like, you're going to learn a little bit about yourself every one you make. And some of them might be good in a filmmaking context, and some of them might be good just for you personally. But by continuing to create them consistently, I think that's kind of like the key that I see.
That's awesome.
And one of the biggest, one of the most impactful points in my journey was when I was making a film a week. Like this was many years ago, and that was incredibly revealing. Most of them were like terrible, but there was a couple that were like really funny and interesting, and I learned different parts of like my voice. And then when I was in China for 2 months, one time, I went there for a bunch of times for 2 months, I was like, I just want to make 3 projects over the span of this, and I want them to meet different needs. Like I want one of them to be like a visual meditation. I want one of them to be like practicing storytelling, and I want one of them to be like with my wife's family, you know, and just making things and like learning. And then maybe those won't be great, but maybe they will. And then maybe they'll lead to something else that's even better down the line. So practice, just like athletes do, you know, same thing.
We've been talking about community a lot, and I wanted to ask you about the Nourish community.
Yeah, for sure. So Nourish was actually the kind of, what's the best way to put it? The evolution of Variable. So Variable is a production company. It shut its doors, and then many years later, I reopened it as a community for filmmakers in pursuit of wellness, meaningful relationships, and purpose. And the idea with that was like community. That's what I felt I always had at Variable, and it's like what I missed so much. And so much of the incredible work and experiences and people I got to meet were within that context of community at Variable. And so I was always thinking about like, okay, what was the unique kind of DNA of that, and what made that special, and like how can we bring it here through something that is just a space to like connect and encourage one another and grow. And so it's been like a 2.5-year experiment, I want to say, like building an online community. And it's led to some of the best collaborations I've been a part of. A lot of the members there have met a lot of great people there because it's values based. So you already know, like on the basis of being in there, that you have these things in common, or you're at least asking like similar questions. And so, yeah, it's just, you know, we do weekly Zoom meetings. There's a lot of different themes that pop up. And yeah, it's just like, if you want to meet really great group of filmmakers that are like thinking about sustainability, I think is a big part of it too. Like sustaining their careers and, you know, not burning out and enjoying the process. It's all kind of rooted in that stuff. So.
And is that open to anybody? Can like anybody sign up for that?
Yeah, for sure. I think there's at the moment, like an intake questionnaire, but honestly, like anybody that signs up is gonna get in, and there's a 2-week trial, and if you don't like it, you can just cancel it. You know, it's no stress.
Well, I think kind of like talking about sustainability and kind of how to sustain one's career, I can lead to this next question, because I am very curious about like what your take is on the future of directing, you know, or of this industry, or even just like the industry in general, like, you know, like that can be advertising, you know, like what is the kind of future of that, or do you think something needs to change within either kind of industry?
I would like to think that the future would be radical authenticity, like truly embodying the message of who we are and our values and what we stand for, like in the work itself. And I just can't imagine another future. I think it's going to become much more I think as a director, we're going to have to be like much more focused on the lane that we want to be in. I mean, I've been hearing this for years and years of just like, find your niche, you know, find your niche, et cetera, et cetera. But I don't think that niche necessarily means like, oh, I'm only going to do outdoor films, you know? Like I want my niche to be heartfelt storytelling. And that can transcend any type of genre or any type of whatever it is. So like I've been really practicing hard on honing that in myself the last couple of years. I mean, honestly, it's been what I've been trying to do for my whole career. But as you know, like the voice gets diluted a lot by like just things you got to do to pay the bills. But at this point in my life, having paused from commercial directing for now, which I was just talking to a friend who's a rep the other day. So I might do some commercial directing jobs in the future. But my point was, even when I was talking to her, was like, I only want to do the jobs that feel like they're heartfelt and I actually feel can offer some type of like valuable perspective. And that's going to make it hard for me to make a living in advertising. Like for, but maybe not. Maybe there's a world in the future where brands are like, oh, we really want that. But regardless of my interests, I think it's like, man, if you really double down on like that community value and people really felt that in your body of work, and maybe there's another one and they sense another value that you're exploring, and they really sense like, wow, this guy really knows how to tell these like community stories really well, or really knows how to create the feeling of community through his work. Like that'll be front and center on like every pitch. And that could look a lot of different ways. But whatever the values are, whatever would interest you the most, I think it's about just getting like really hardcore focused on that.
I like love that so much. 'Cause I think that's something I've been thinking about a lot right now. Is like, oh, what is my niche? I have too many niches. My work's too watered down. But I've been thinking about it just as like comedy director, like outdoor sports director, brand anthems versus like taking a value and being like, like I want all my work to be like heartfelt or human focused or community focused. Like I think that puts so much more clarity around it. So like I love that. Thank you so much for saying that. Do you think like, can you have too many values? like how many values should someone have?
So I encourage starting with 5 and then whittling those down to 2. Mm-hmm. There's a really great podcast are you familiar with Brene Brown?
Oh, absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, she's amazing. There's a really great podcast that she does with one of her co-hosts. I can't remember her name, but it's like their first podcast of the year. I'll send you the link to it. But they're the ones that really got me into like hardcore having 2 values, because 5 is too many, honestly, to make like really difficult decisions. And you can cross justify and create all these different excuses, but if you just have 2 of them, it's really hard to see past those.
Yeah,
it's very convicting having 2.
That's awesome. I'm gonna definitely practice kind of narrowing those in. And Brene Brown, I need to go back and listen to her podcast because she like literally got me through COVID. I listened to her so much during COVID. It was great.
She's amazing.
Well, I want to just kind of throw it back to you before we kind of get to like this lightning round of questions. But is there anything you want to just touch on or hit about coaching or directing that you don't think we touched on or would be important to touch on?
I think coaching aside, like you mentioned before, mentorship is incredibly valuable. I did not have mentors in the industry when I was starting out, or coaches or anyone. It's not that I didn't see the value in them. I was just too focused in my own lane to like even think about having a mentor or something. And I just know how incredibly valuable that is to have someone in your corner. And there's a lot of ways to like attract mentors, because the best part of like having a mentor is that it's free. The bad part about it is that it's not typically as like consistent as you might want it to be. But I think attracting a mentor is something that is just a really wise move for anybody like looking to level up.
Do you think the mentor has to be in the industry, or can it be anybody? Because I've struggled with that a little bit with like my own therapist of like, I don't know, maybe I'm just an asshole, but I'm like, oh, you don't get it. You don't understand the industry sometimes.
Yeah. Well, I think if you're looking to grow in the industry, definitely finding one in the industry would be very beneficial. But if you're just looking for, life skills, how to stay mentally sane, whatever. I mean, I want to say I have 3 mentors in my life that are like 70 and older, but they help keep me grounded, and that's incredibly valuable. But like they're not helping me with the logistics of jobs or representation or, juggling all the different things that pop up practically. So I just think get a few mentors in a few different areas if you can. It definitely doesn't hurt.
That's awesome. Great. Well, let's get to the lightning round here. So these are just kind of quick hitting questions. Don't need to spend too much time thinking about them, but just like to end every show with this. So number one is what directors are inspiring you right now? This could be in the commercial world or film.
Oh man. I would just say anybody that's doing it, anybody that's doing it at any capacity. I think a lot about my coaching clients because they're serious about it. That's how I get a lot of my inspiration is from any director at any part in their journey that's really serious. I also think about my friend Steve Hoover, who's a director and editor. He just edited my documentary, and I think people that just also Jay Duplass, who I just worked with, and these are, when I was thinking about this, it's people that have really big hearts and lead with love over fear and have a genuine sense of collaboration is so inspiring to me. So that's my lightning answer.
Okay. So then what inspires you outside of directing or coaching?
Community building is very inspiring to me. Just bringing people together for a shared cause. I'm involved in a meetup in Baltimore with two other women that's just called Baltimore Filmmakers, and meeting people in the community that are doing awesome stuff, meeting up for coffees and feeling like we're actually doing cool stuff here in a small town of Baltimore is incredibly inspiring. And so within that is conversations, connections, that's really inspiring me. And also just journaling, my own spiritual practices. I get a lot of inspiration and clarity is maybe a better word, from that stuff. But yeah, I'll say those are the main things.
What's a tool that you cannot live without? So this could be pre-pro, production, or in post. Just any sort of tool that you find that you use all the time when you're creating that is invaluable.
Ooh, a journal.
Nice.
Yeah, definitely a journal.
Great. And then we always have the previous guest leave a question for the next guest. I think that this, and it's always just random. I literally just take the last one, but I think this one is perfect for you. So it says, and you've hit on some of this, but what advice would you give someone early in their career and late in their career?
Early in their career. Oh, man. I gotta think about that one. Advice is so tricky.
Yeah, right.
Never want to say the wrong thing.
Or maybe phrase it towards yourself. What is something that you wish you would have known when you were, 22 and starting Variable, and then maybe later in your career?
I think just knowing the value of my gut instinct is a really big one. Because I look back on certain things. I think generally I do have a really good gut instinct, but I think there's a lot of times where I didn't follow my gut because there was some type of egotistical drive that was shadowing what I actually felt, if that makes sense. Mm-hmm. And so, yeah, just trusting my gut and bringing it to the surface through journaling and just saying it out loud, even if it hurts.
All right. And then if you would leave a question for the next guest.
So I thought about this one because you sent it over in your email. And it's a question that my wife raised up in the community about a year ago, and it got a lot of really great responses. So I'm just going to steal it from her. And it is, when is the last time you laughed like a child?
Oh, nice. I love that. Jon, I really appreciate your time. And and what you're doing. I find it fascinating, and I'll probably take your questionnaire, try to get some coaching or get into the Nourish community, because I absolutely love what you're doing, and really appreciate it. But where can people find you on social? What are kind of your handles and your websites?
So my personal one, I think is, I think it's, let me see, J Bregel, Bregel. And that's like my filmmaking one. And then the Nourish community is at thenourish.community. And then the website is just jonathanbregel.com. And then the website is thenourish.community.
Cool. And if people want to get coaching, do they go to your personal website then?
Yep. Yeah, it's just Jonathan Bregel, and then there's like a coaching tab on there.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
Well, awesome. Thanks again, and I'm super excited to see what you do in the future. So,
Yeah, thanks, Evan. Likewise, man. Curious to see what area you start growing into more in the months and years to come.
Me too. All right, that does it for another show. Thanks for watching the Commercial Directors Podcast, and please subscribe to the show on any of the platforms where you listen to your podcast and on YouTube. YouTube's a great place where you can actually watch the breakdown, so make sure you subscribe. Also, give us a follow on the gram at the Commercial Directors Pod, and please DM us there. We would love to hear from you on potential guests you'd like on the show and what topics you want to learn more about. Or you can email me at evan@swinehartco.com, and that's SWINEHARTCO.com.